You have now tapped in with the introspective father and son duo. Last name may be strange, but never strangers to the game. Adjust the listening devices and keep it live.
Coming in, flex. I just wanna win, LABB, who we running with, 2233, I'm on 10 again, state your name.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of No Strangers to the Game. Per usual, I'm Ja, and we have Troy. But today we have a special guest, someone we know well, that people listening and watching probably don't know as well, but my big sister, Atiya Strange, Troy's firstborn daughter. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing just, really a kind of a conversation between a family, a father, a daughter, and son. But Atiya was able to attend the HBCU, Hampton University, and we thought she'd give interesting perspective on the HBCU experience and the value they give to those in the Black community. But to get us started today, I think, first of all, anybody have any opening remarks or anything they want to share before we get started?
Hey, what's happening, Tia? Just let the listeners know that this whole concept, this whole podcast was really Atiya's brainchild. So the credit goes to her for the idea and production behind, the podcast. So we're just the faces, Jai and I, and she's the machine behind the whole deal. So we appreciate her putting it together, and it's been a blast for the first 30 plus shows. So we're looking for a few more. So we're excited to have her on.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and let's get it started.
Yeah, just pointing out the power of technology. We're all in 3 different parts of the country, California, Virginia, and Kansas. But we're able to meet face to face and, have a conversation like this. So that's pretty cool. But like my dad said, this is Tia's first time on the show. She's seen every episode, edited every episode, posted every episode. But this is her first time actually making an appearance. And so we're excited to get into the discussion today. To get us started, something I think we could probably talk about for hours on end. Growing up in the Strange household. Me and my dad talked about this a lot on the show because he raised me and I was growing up at his house. But I think it's interesting to have the oldest child's perspective and my older sister see what she has to say. What was it like for you growing up in the Strange household?
Yeah, growing up, it was always something to be learned in the Strange house. We really weren't, I would say, a family that followed trends or, keeping up with the Joneses. That definitely wasn't us. I would say that mom and dad were conscious. Mm-hmm. And so that, I guess, really fed into a lot of the decisions that they made when raising us. Like, we didn't grow up eating red meat or pork. And that was due to some stuff they learned when they were back in school. And, we learned a lot about Black history. We didn't do immunizations, went to African dance classes, always at Lamert Park, African dance circles, things like that. Celebrated Kwanzaa. But even though, we had those ideals, you were still in a Black household. So it was some chores every Saturday, gospel music playing, you doing chores. And we did go to church, and we both played instruments. So yeah, that is the Strange house in a nutshell.
Yeah. I'll let Dad chime in here, but T is right. Like I said, it was always something to learn. There was always a lesson there. And, I think there were times where it would kind of bother me that we weren't keeping up with the Joneses family, because I wanted to keep up with the Joneses. Like, I want what my friends have. I want the things that they have, the material stuff that they have. But I think through time, and I feel like I kind of got this at a younger age, but through time, I definitely learned is like, that's not what's important. So we got a lot. What I think our parents did spend a lot on and did give us a lot of was experience that other kids probably didn't get to. We got exposure. We got to travel at a young age, which Malia's getting to do too. We've been out the country, across the country, all over the place. And so that's something that they spent money on, but that held a lot of value. And it's something we've carried with us for the longest. So.
Yeah, we always knew that material items, just growing up and being a kid myself, get something brand new and next week I can't even find it, or it's broke, or I don't want to play with it. So I really understood that the experiences are things that you're going to remember over time. and being able to navigate through life, you know. And you guys, one of the things I know you guys hated was when I made you do your webs, write your summaries for books and things that you were reading in school, which I know Jai hated them, and Tia hated them, and now Malia hates them. But I think it was allowing you to be able to read something, summarize it, and be able to draw some conclusions so that you can comprehend what's going on and think for yourself. And those are the things that, as a parent, we always wanted to do, is make sure that regardless of where we're at, you guys are able to take care of yourselves. And the sooner you're able to do that, the better, because, you know, life is unpredictable. And if something were to happen to one of us or both of us, you guys will be able to take care of yourselves. So those are the things that we wanted to make sure that we were instilling in you, being able to be self-sufficient and to be able to take care of yourselves.
Yeah. I think that kind of may lead into the next question, but I know it's always interesting to ask others about their household, but it was really interesting hearing Tia talk about the household that I grew up in too, and like her painting the picture of like things we did. I was like, oh yeah, we did do all that, and like it was how we grew up. But that's interesting. But Tia, my next question for you is, and I think we always ask this because it's interesting to see when people answer this question, what kind of, I guess you could say, you know, ways that may influence what they're doing now or their interests. The question is, what is your most memorable experience, you know, from your entire life thus far?
Thus far, the most memorable experience for me was spending a year in South Africa. That brought a complete, I think, shift in my perspective. Just having more of an open mind to different things that I was not accustomed to, and being able to adapt to change. That whole experience was life-changing. Went over there to teach English and mentor orphans, and I think they had a bigger impact on me than I on them, which isn't great, but yeah, that's really how I feel about that.
Well, that's your perspective. They may have a different perspective. You might have taught them a lot more, good or bad, than they taught you. But let's talk about that a little more. I like to dive into that South Africa experience. I think that's always cool. I always tell people, hey, my sister lived in South Africa for a year. And they're like, what, really? First of all, I didn't know much about South Africa, but, you know, from the pictures you sent, I learned a lot about the area and stuff like that. But it's very far away. Dad, what was it like, you know, when your daughter says, hey, I'm going to be in South Africa for a year?
Yeah, it was a bit alarming. It wasn't something I was expecting. You know, I know she wanted to travel abroad. I know she wanted to you know, get out of the valley and move other places outside of India. But I didn't expect that. So when she said it, I'm just thinking, you want to go into teaching? You want to go into teaching in South Africa? And I wasn't against it. It was just that it was so far away and not knowing anyone over there. At least in South Africa, I had people that I knew in Ghana that, you know, I had some connections to where I would have felt more comfortable her being in Ghana than South Africa, because, you know, I had people that could reach out and touch her, and, you know, if something went wrong or something happened, you know, she had someone that she can count on. So that made it very uncomfortable for me. But, you know, I'm a person that, you know, if this is something you're willing to do and you're ready, you know, I'm gonna let you do it. Because that's the type of person I am. If I'm something make up my mind, I'm doing it. I don't care what anybody say, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. So I know if she my child, that's probably what was gonna happen. So instead of fighting with her, I just say, all right, you go ahead.
That was a major leap of faith. And I know you were a little, you know, more accepting of that decision. I know my mom, on the other hand, was not having it. But the thing that I guess drove that decision was, like you said, the fact that I did want to go abroad and see the world. And it, I think, was kind of my finding myself, my development period in life. And so I think it was a rite of passage, of a kind of a thing that I needed to go through. And I think I grew, like, not necessarily up and mature. I matured, but also I grew in my perspective and having a better view of the world.
Sounds like that was your Bildungsroman. If anybody doesn't know what that means, look that up. That's your vocab word for the day. I know you talked about wanting to see the world. And one of the interesting things that I think led to that, because obviously I grew up the same way as you and I grew up in a house with you, is our big move from moving from LA to where we lived, most of our childhood, the Coachella Valley. LA was obviously a much bigger city. We saw a lot, we did a lot, we were able to experience a lot more. Moving to India, our parents made sure we got out and we saw a lot of things. But how do you think that move affected you growing up? Or, you know what I mean? Like what differences do you think there were in the two upbringings?
Yeah, I mean, LA is a much bigger city than Indio. I think I saw the most change when I was in the classroom. So I went from being in school with Tajay and Daryl and Kiki to being in school with Allison and Nicole and Adam. And then from being in class with Luis and Maria, and, it was like a complete change. And I think the environment that I was in, it catered to who was the majority at the time. And so I felt like I experienced things differently when I was in a class with all Black students versus being in a class with all Hispanic or Latino students. So for me, that was where I saw the most change. But as far as living in Indio, Dad's family is from there. So it was always, that family environment when we were around town. I mean, having the last name Strange, it's not common, and they know it. And so, oh, you a Strange, you can to so-and-so and so-and-so. So that for me was like, oh, that's cool, And then I learned, oh, I don't really like this that much, because you couldn't get away with nothing. So they kept up with the strangers, they kept up with you, and they kept track of what was going on. So in that regard, I was like, okay, this is So but on the same token, I think coming from Los Angeles, I always knew that there was something bigger. And I think in Indio, if you are born in a smaller town, you grow up in a smaller town, sometimes it's easier to kind of have that small town mindset mentality. And coming from a bigger city, I knew there was way more out there to be seen, to experience. So, I mean, growing up in LA, we used to go to the tapings of the Parkers, and we used to go to Lamert Park all the time, drum circles, going to different fairs, going to different concerts, and just, I think exposure was very important at a young age. And so I think I held that momentum, and I felt like when I did get into a smaller setting, it was like, okay, I'm outgrowing this. And so I think that also inspired my, I guess, need to get away once it was time to go off to school or go to do my teaching abroad.
And Dad, I think you have an interesting perspective on this, because you were born and raised in the same city we were raised in, but you obviously, both of us were born in LA. You lived in LA and went to school in LA. So you knew, I think, both areas really well, and you obviously have traveled and done a lot, and you've seen a lot. What was it like to, first of all, raise your kids in the same place that you were born in, where you have a lot of your family, but also to know that we experienced a lot of that, the LA and that big city life, and, all of the things that had to offer, and then to move to kind of a smaller town where we knew everybody. What was it like raising your kids in that way?
Well, it was twofold for me. One, being around family, I knew that there was going to be people that looked out for you, that I can count on, that, hey, if you're out somewhere, if someone saw you, most likely they would know who you were, and you would probably knew who they were. So it wasn't getting away with a whole lot of stuff. So there was always eyes and ears on you guys, regardless of where you went. And, people that I can trust, that when I would say something to you, you may look at me like, he don't know what he's talking about. But I had, a network of people, friends and family say the same thing. And you got to look at it and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. So that was helpful. On the flip side, like Tia talked about, is that exposure. And, that's why we made an effort to get you guys out and do different things to expose you to what was beyond, the Coachella Valley and Indio in particular, because we wanted you to be able to dream and believe. and of the impossibilities are the possibilities, should I say. Because when I was a kid growing up, that's what my grandmother did for us. Every summer we'd take trips. We'd be in Oregon, Washington, traveling. And so, the world always was bigger than Indio. And it was like, I can't wait to get out of here. And most kids who grow up here, it's like, man, I can't wait to get out of here. And literally, I couldn't wait. And I had vowed that I'd never come back. But I did. I came back with the intent to get some experience, learn some things, and then really move out. But things happened, and long story short, we stayed. And I think it was a good move, because I think it inspired you guys to be like, I got to do something, because there's a bigger world than just Indio. And so in that regard, I'm glad we did. In some respects, I was a little hesitant and like, do I want to be in Indio? But overall, I think it worked out all right.
I don't know what they're talking about, all these people watching you, make sure you don't get in trouble. I consider myself the golden child. So in terms of getting in trouble, that wasn't me. Now, Tia, she took her lumps and I learned from them. So I was, like I said, I was a golden child. So all this people watching me thing, that ain't bother me too much. But no, I enjoyed living in Indio. I think we obviously experienced enough. We would go to LA a lot. We'd be, on the go a lot. We'd see all these different types of things, college tours and all that type of stuff. So like that, so I think we grew up in a small town. We got the benefits of growing up in a small town, but I think we got to experience enough and see enough to where we knew we wanted more than that for ourselves, most likely. Or if we did come back to Indio or a small town, we were coming with a plan or something we wanted to accomplish. But with that being said, after you left, you went to an HBCU. You wearing your Hampton U, the real HU sweater. For those that can't see or listening, that's the Hampton University. It's just the real HU, as they say. We want to dive into that experience for you in terms of going to HBCU. Me and my dad, we both went to college, obviously. I just graduated, but I went to a predominantly white institution, Purdue University. It was not like an HBCU. Even though I never went to an HBCU, I can tell you right now, it wasn't like an HBCU. I think it was good for me in other ways. Obviously, athletically, I got a lot of great networking connections and things like that. But I wonder personally about the benefits. I always do have in the back of my mind, like, what would it have been like if I went to school with all people that just look like me? So describe a little bit of that for you in terms of, first of all, what made you decide to go to an HBCU and specifically Hampton, but two, what was it like, being there?
All right. Well, first of all, I do want to define HBCU because we assume everybody knows, but they might not. So HBCU stands for Historically Black College and University. And when I was younger, we went on a lot of college tours. Dad, like he said, he made sure we got out. So, and you know what? The craziest thing is a lot of times, like, these trips, they cost money, and we came up with the funding. So that was amazing. And it even providing an opportunity for the kids at the church, allowing them to be able to see, the opportunities outside of the desert. That took a lot of funding, and I'm glad that we were able to get that done. So my decision to go to an HBCU, I guess it came in, two parts. One, I was an athlete. I ran track, and I just knew I was going to get a full ride scholarship, and that was my ticket, and I was about to be out of here. And the cards didn't play out that way. And so my mentality at that point was, well, one, I still got to get up out of here. And so historically Black colleges, for the most part, are not in this area, or not in California. They're going to be around the southern parts and going to be up the East Coast. And two, I was like, well, if I'm going to have to pay for school, I'd rather my dollars or my parents' dollars go to help our community or support, what we have going on. So that was kind of fed into the decision. It was originally Howard. That was the goal. I was like, all right, well, we doing Howard. And I didn't get into Howard. And
I remember that differently.
Tuskegee.
I remember you was really set on Tuskegee.
Yeah,
and you got accepted to Tuskegee. You had a scholarship, but the reason you didn't choose it because they didn't really have your major. Because on the college tour, that was one of the schools you really, really liked.
Okay,
So
yeah.
that was your first choice.
Because I remember
Yes,
that hoodie you had.
that yes,
Never took that
Tuskegee's
thing
will
off.
always at my heart. I still got my Tuskegee sweatshirt, and I used to wear it on Hampton's campus, and they looked at me crazy. But the at the time I was in the band, and so Tuskegee was perfect as far as the band atmosphere that I saw, because we kind of had a night tour, and I was like in awe of the band that I saw. And when it finally came time to decide, okay, what do you want to do? What's the plan? I was like, okay, I don't want to do science. And so Tuskegee, shout out to Tuskegee, that's really what they specialize in. George Washington Carver, that's where he was. Actually, a Hampton grad. He founded Tuskegee University. And so, shout out to him. And I think that was a great
Booker T. Washington.
Booker T. Washington, right. And I guess the final decision came when I was like, I don't want to do science. And so that's why Tuskegee kind of got pushed to the side. But Tuskegee will always have my heart, first love. And then Howard, when I was looking at the best, I was like, I'm gonna go to, an HBCU, I want to go to the best. So at the time, the rankings, 1 was Howard, 2 was Spelman, 3 was Morehouse, 4 was Hampton. So like I said, I didn't get into Howard. And I was working with a lot of people writing me letters of recommendation. So we appealed. And then it was, all right, well, let's look at your other options. So Dr. Farmer, he recommended Hampton, the other HU. And I was like, well, let's give it a shot. So I applied, and it's funny how these things work, because when you start to manifest something or start talking about something, then it's like, oh yeah, I know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. So Miss Rita from the church, she had a sister-in-law who was the provost at the university. She was like, oh yeah, I'll put a word in for you. We'll get this done. And come to find out, the provost walked over to the admissions office, and I was already admitted. So she was like, all right, cool. So let's get some money for school. That was the next goal. I was like, cool, I'm with it. So that that was the next goal. Okay, I'm in school now, and now it's not Howard, but it's the next best. It's Hampton. And you know what? I love my Hampton experience, and you can't tell me Hampton ain't the best. So there's that. But then came the looking for the funding for school. I knew it was going to be some finances. I was going to have to pay for something, but we can try to cover the spread a little more with some scholarships. So I was in the counseling office every day filling out scholarships. I was getting scholarships for being under 5'5". I was scholarships for being a track athlete, for being from California, and that is ultimately what happened. As far as Hampton, I got a scholarship from the Alumni Association, and it just so happened that someone fell through, and they needed a scholar from the far west, from the West Coast, and that was me. So I ended up getting that scholarship, and that was the beginning.
To add a little detail to that story, hold on, because there was some pieces you left. Just a real quick tidbit. I think this story is important, because if you don't know Troy Strange, then this gives you some insight to who he is. And if you know him, then this story fits perfectly. So Tia said this, like she said, she was applying for all of these other scholarships, and she may have gotten a few, but ultimately it wasn't, a big lump sum of money to be able to help her pay for school. And so my dad was like, well, why have you called the financial aid office? And Tia was like, well, I've called them, I'm calling them, to make sure, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately they just were kind of giving her the runaround, didn't have anything for her. And my dad said, well, we're going to catch them early in the morning, and Hampton's on the East Coast, we're on the West Coast. So they wake up at 5 a.m. every day, and they were calling, just literally asking, hey, do you guys have any opportunities, any scholarships that have become available, blah, 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 blah. For whatever reason, they did it every day. I would have quit, but they kept doing it because, once again, this is Troy Strange and who he is.
Okay, look, that was him. He was like, no, call him again. And so I'm like, I'm sick of this. They keep telling me we ain't got it. We ain't got it for you.
No, you just didn't ask the right question. So you was asking, do you have anything? I said, no. Who makes the decision on who gets scholarships? See, I need to talk to them. I don't
No,
want to
that's
talk
a
to
real
anybody.
thing. You got to learn to ask the right questions. That is something that you will learn. If you don't learn in life, you need to learn. That's a real thing. So, Dad, for that, I do appreciate you, because they, even dealing with the government, calling about my stimulus, you got to ask the right questions. But back to what Ja was saying. I did call every morning. I was asking, do you have any scholarships available? No. I mean, by the time I got accepted, the presidential award had been decided. The athletic awards, for the most part, had already been distributed. So I was like, okay, well, thank you. And Dad's calling back. And then he took the phone and he was like, who's making the decision? So he got on the phone with Miss Fels, who is the head of the admissions, and they just got to having a conversation. And by the end of that, she was like, you must be living right. We just had something fall through. Go ahead and get her information over to us, and we'll make sure we get that by close of business today. And that was that.
That's Troy Strange, y'all. T, I want to ask you real quick. Give me what. And I think it's interesting because the HBCUs you have funny stories about HBCUs. I want to get one funny story. I don't know if it's your hurricane story, if it's your fried chicken Wednesday story, or something, but something that I know you'll never probably experience at a different, not a non-HBCU, put it that way.
Okay. I mean, I can only speak from an HBCU perspective because that's all I have. Yeah,
but there's certain things that you experienced there that you wouldn't have got somewhere else. You know that.
Okay.
Curfew.
Well, yeah. That's where I was going. So, Hampton University is a unique university in that in the first 12 weeks before homecoming, freshmen have a curfew. Freshmen that live on campus, and so it was interesting. First of all, this is my first time living with other Black girls, and so just learning how we all operate, weave everywhere, braiding hair, talking out the window. And so I was in a dorm with an OG, Mama Wilkins, and she didn't play none of that. Folks got in there, got to acting out, and she straightened that all the way out. They were like, oh, I don't even have a curfew at home. And Mama Wilkins set it straight. You got one here. You need to be in at 11 on weekdays and 1 on weekends. And she was not playing. Girls were trying to sneak out the windows. It was always something. And she catch him, and she had him cleaning up. She had him cleaning up. Oh yeah, come on, get in here and clean up. And then they had to give a speech. They had to give a speech during our dorm meetings. We would have dorm meetings, I think once a month on Sundays. And you gonna talk about this. So I never got I was like, I'm fine being in at 11. That's fine with me. I didn't have any of those issues, but that was interesting.
I think that speaks to some of the value, and I know Dad always talks about it. That's like that almost extended family feel of HBCUs, is that you have like those mothers on campus, that somebody's looking out for them, that as of our complexion is of our community, and that adds a little bit of value, and that makes things feel more welcoming and a little more comfortable as a parent. Am I right, Dad?
Yeah, the traditions that they have, and like for the most part, they like family. You have the dorm mothers and people that are on campus, the faculty, and you sit down and you talk to them, and they talk to you like they've known you for your whole life. Yeah. They just were very personable and intimate, and it made me a lot more comfortable, leaving her, across the other side of the country. And so that experience for me was more comforting, and it just, I thought that the experience would be, enriching and be a wonderful experience for her. Because once I got into college, I didn't really know what an HBCU was until the tail end of my college career. I did go to a Howard homecoming, which was off the hook. I missed those experiences, but overall, I wanted her and you guys to have a college experience that you can remember for the rest of your life, because that's probably the time in your life where you're going to grow the most, because you're going to be out on your own. from being a child in your parents' home to become an adult on your own, and you learn a lot of things in between. So I wanted that experience to be rich, and I wanted to be something that you guys could remember for the rest of your lives and cherish that. So, but the HBCU experience is something that's a little different than most other college experiences.
Yeah, like you said, that you know, it takes a village type of mentality. I thought I was leaving, you know, that small town feel, but in actuality, like an HBCU really is like your small community. And so everybody was looking out. You know, you had the old ladies in the cafeteria. They was like, "Come on, me put some meat on your baby." And you had the cleaning people. They was always spitting some type of. They was trying to tell you something. And you had your dorm mothers always teaching you lessons. Counselors always giving you advice, and even the professors. It was like a village, and we were raising all of these young adults up to go into the world and be professionals. So for that, I'm grateful that I was able to experience that. And I think, like you said, as far as growing up, I feel like I grew up a whole lot from living in a dorm situation on my own. I mean, I'm living with a stranger who I'm learning to cohabitate with, learning how to work with people. I mean, you work on group projects in school, but learning how to work with people, I guess on a more professional level. We were in the school I was in, I was a communication major. We were doing writing articles and getting stories on campus. So we were calling real news stations. We were getting stories around the Hampton area, and so we had to work together. We had to come correct. I mean, this is not just a little school project on campus. This is, you know, you're putting Hampton's name out there in the city of Hampton. And I was also an RA, so that came with a whole lot of lessons, learning how to manage females. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was interesting. I was in the choir. I was Miss Hampton University choir. Shout out to the choir. And I was in the student leadership program, SLP. Shout out to SLP. And I was in a music fraternity for women, SAI. Shout out to the mesmerizing U Gamma chapter of SAI.
Wait, hold on, go back, because this is one of my last questions I got for you. Is you talked about the Scripps Howard School. You were a communications major. I'm wondering and interested to find out what you believe that added to your experience, and, you know, in terms of what you're doing now and where you're going now, what you're trying to accomplish. One, just give me a brief overview of how that was for you and how well you think that prepared you. And two, I'm always interested to wonder, do you think you would have been better served, you know, academically? We talk about, you know, lifestyle and growing up and things like that, but for an academic purpose only, do you think you'd have been better served going to a different school?
Okay, so first of all, a different school, I'm not sure that I would say my experiences were all, I would say, once in a lifetime. So I'm not gonna try to downplay any experience that I had. I think everything that I did experience, I experienced for a reason. And so for that reason, I wouldn't say that going to a different school would have changed it. What I will say though is the amount of exposure in the area. So a lot of times the cities that you're in or the areas that you're around is kind of the environment that you develop in. And so Hampton is a city, but it's not like your major cities, like your DC or your New York or your Miami. So learning how to function in a city like that, that was worth something. And I think the only other thing I kind of wish that I was able to experience was another big city type of experience. But whatever experience that I was able to take from Hampton, I knew that I was going to make the most of it. And I still used those experiences to help guide me in today. I live in the Northern Virginia area and I'm close to DC. And so I do work with people in DC. I work with some Howard graduates. And so, yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, this ain't that different. And you just, you kind of put things into place. Oh, okay, so this is just on a little larger scale. But to go back to your first question, what was your first question again?
Nah, I mean, I think you kind of answered it. And the point I was trying to make was that ultimately you may say, you know, Hampton's not the, you know, best journalism school in the country or the best communication school in the country, but that whole experience that you gain from, you know, your time in the dorms to the people around, just the connections you make with people that are in your community, I think that adds to the experience, and ultimately that's what gets you, you know, a lot further. And so I think that's a big thing.
I'd also say with that too, you have prominent people that came through that school. I mean, you had DJ Envy of the Breakfast Club went through Hampton. You have, what's her name?
Wanda Sykes.
I mean, the comedian, you know.
Ruth Carter.
So you have a lot of people that came through that communications program that are doing some big things. So I think what she said best is that, you know, she made the most of those experiences and they gave her what she needed. It's really up to you at that point to connect the rest of the dots to make it happen for yourself. So,
and the key to that too is that I think what's even better about it, once again, going back to a whole experience, is as those people have gone through that school and they've had the Hampton experience, that's something you guys can connect on. One, they look like you, so there's a little bit of that comfort there. But hey, you're a Hampton grad. Did you know so-and-so? And that's a connection you can make, just like with any other school. But I think it's added because it's such a unique experience in that way.
Right. Yeah. And to add on to that, the village feel, like I'm gonna be quick. The village feel is for real. Like it spans so far. Like it's a network that you've created coming from that village. And then, I mean, everybody else is doing it. So yeah, we're looking out for our own as well.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's ultimately what we're going to need. My last word and kind of I wouldn't say a question, but just kind of comment is, I think a lot of the attention and exposure that the HBCUs have been getting recently, I think the NBA is doing a great job of trying to help fund and you know, increase the exposure and awareness of HBCUs. As someone who went to HBCUs, I can imagine that makes you, one, proud, but two, also you're hoping that can lead to just greater opportunity for people that look like us to ultimately go to these schools and have the best experience possible. Absolutely.
Yeah. It like I said, it goes back to exposure. That is very important. Just in exposure to a lot of different things, good and bad. It really helps to round out a human being. And so with people now at least being aware of that HBCUs are a thing that exists. Oh, okay. And, you know, now finding, oh, okay, this is something that I feel like I align with because you were exposed to it. Now you found, oh, this is my path. This is my avenue right here. And so I think that's powerful. And I think that it's also giving the corporate world like a view into, oh, HBCUs, let's give back. Oh, let's partner with them. They have this going on. And, you know, they're always trying to do these give back programs and things like that. And so this is, you know, here's your opportunity. We here.
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
And statistically, when you look at the number of doctors, I think lawyers and dentists, a large portion of Black doctors and dentists come from HBCUs. So there's specific programs and just that family village in the way that the HBCUs cater to those students to prepare them. So when they go out into the workforce, into the world, they're prepared. You know, they're going to conduct themselves a certain way. There's just a certain expectation when you go through some of those universities. Also in the early 90s, there was sort of a movement. It was largely through hip hop where you had the HBCU sweaters and sweatsuits and hats that were, you could see if you go back and look at some of the early 90s, you know, music videos, you can see those with that same type of exposure and promotion that was taking place. And so it's good to see, you know, now recently from the corporate world that they're shining some light on that and giving it a little more exposure.
I think that's something that's coming back around too with the HBCU, kind of the fashion and it being a fashion statement. Chris Paul's done a great job of, you know, shedding a light on HBCUs, all of them, whether it be through his shoes that he wears on his court and during the game and stuff like that. But speaking of ancient history in the 90s, let's get into a little bit of Black history. We're still doing Black 365. And I figured today we'd do some Black history facts on Hampton University since, you know, we have that connection there. T, you got some Hampton University history facts for us?
Absolutely. So I did want to say that HBCUs were started really by Black philanthropists a lot of the times. And then you had the white philanthropists who felt the need to give back because they've been through so much. And so Hampton was started as a normal school in 1868 by General Chapman Armstrong. And he was a white military general. And it was actually started as an experiment to kind of see, do Africans and Native Americans have the capacity to learn, to, take in this information? And they found, oh, yeah, they're capable. They can. And so from there, it kind of evolved and it became the Hampton Normal Institute of Agriculture. And so they started to build the buildings that you see on campus actually were built by Hampton students, and they were farming on the land. And then from there, it evolved to Hampton Institute. Okay, we're a school now. We teach. And so from there, the numbers have been up and down. A lot of times it was more of a financial burden. And so in the World War II, the university or the institute was falling on hard financial times. They were like, we may not make it. And so the government came in and they actually built some buildings. They were like, we're going to set up shop here. We are going to work on some of our militia or artillery, some things of that nature for the ward that they were in. So they built buildings and they were training up students, Black students. They were like, yeah, you guys are capable and we need you on deck. Like, we need you to help build up this stuff. We need you to know how to conduct maintenance on it, all of those things. And so after the war, the university had gotten popular, or the institute gotten popular, and they ended up buying back those buildings. And they were like, okay, we back in business. And so in 1981, they officially became a university, and is still Hampton University to this day.
Well, there it is, the real HU. Once again, T, we appreciate you having in front of the camera this time around. And I think this was a great conversation we had about first of all, our family growing up, things like that, but also the experience that you got going to an HBCU, specifically Hampton University. Something that, me and Dad didn't get to experience, but we're glad we got to hear your story. So I think that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, we appreciate you guys for tuning in, showing love, and we hope you continue to show that love and support as we continue on.
Peace.
All right, that'll wrap up today's episode. Glad we could take a moment to put you up on game. We post a new podcast every Sunday morning. Now you know. Peace.